no one would do anything about it. Not only that, but when he went before the House Committee in the White House on that day, August 16th, 1948, there was a meeting at the top levels, including the Attorney General and various White House aides. Plans were made to indict Chambers for perjury. They were not going to indict Hiss, they were going to indict Chambers. That persisted well into the end of 1948. Further point, hard to tell all this in 10 minutes. A rewriting of Cold War history in 10 minutes, as Professor Gaddis knows, is difficult. And Lee knows the same. Hiss, just a point about Hiss. Hiss was far more important than has ever been appreciated. Far more important, I might say, than some of the very good histories have appreciated, because they didn't have the records. One of the problems in terms of writing Cold War and other history is getting at the primary sources. Now, one would think that a primary source would be an official government publication, as in the case of Yalta. The Yalta documents are a book of 1,000 pages long. All the run-up to Yalta, all the minutes of the meetings at Yalta, what happened in terms of the aftermath of Yalta, and we discussed some of that in this book. Unfortunately, when those papers were compiled, the State Department did not have the primary records, or all of them. And among the papers they did not have were the papers of Edward R. Stettinius, Jr., who was then the Secretary of State. When he left the State Department in July of 1945, he took his papers with him. They then vanished, not through any sinister means, just they were taken away and not returned. State Department did not have them when it published the Yalta documents. The result is that many revelations that are in the Stettinius papers have been secret for these many decades. These papers, it turns out, are at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And I was able to get them there. And you will find many things there that are not in the official Yalta compilation. But the main thing that I want to stress is that they show the role of Alger Hiss far more extensive than anything that is in the official compilation. Hiss was probably the one American at Yalta who knew what he was doing. And I say that in a most literal sense. Edward R. Stettinius had been Secretary of State for 2 months at the time of Yalta. He was a novice, a neophyte. He knew almost nothing about foreign policy. President Roosevelt, distressingly, the record shows, was almost dead. He very, very confused about many issues. Alger Hiss was not confused. He knew what he was doing, and he was the person who had all the paperwork, he had all the documents, all the cables went through him. He was all over the place. That is in the Stettinius papers. Very little of it is in the Yalta documents. Finally, I'm almost done. Chambers said something very somber, very pessimistic, very defeatist, really. He said that he was leaving the winning side, communism, for the losing side. It was the one thing about which he was wrong. He was wrong about that. What convinced him that he was right about that was the unwillingness of people in authority to hear the truth. They denied the truth, they ignored the truth, they censored the truth. And this came to the fore in a grand jury session in 1947 and 1948, where all of these communists and Soviet agents were paraded in to testify. Alger Hiss, Harry Dexter White, Lachlan Curry, the list is long, they're all in this book. All of them were allowed to walk, and they were allowed to walk because the prosecutors in the Justice Department then said there were only one witness against them, and that's Elizabeth Bentley, who was another ex-communist witness, and therefore we cannot convict these people. They let them all walk. They could have had Hiss then. The other witness that they could have had was Chambers. They refused to call him. It was only when he got called after HUAC's meetings in the summer of '48, after they'd let all these people go, that broke the case and led to the conviction of Alger Hiss. And we have the minutes of those grand jury sessions and the FBI records pertaining to them. That changed the course of history. Whittaker Chambers not only lived history and wrote history, but he changed history. And we, to this day, I don't think fully appreciate how important he was in this pivotal episode where he broke through the cover-up and the concealment to bring about the indictment and later the conviction of Alger Hiss, and the course of Cold War history after that was changed dramatically. My time is up. I thank you for yours.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Thank you, panelists. We have about 15 minutes for questions, but before I ask you to come down and speak into the mics, let me also welcome Governor Daniels to our conference today. Okay. The mics are ready, and your questions are welcome. It's right behind you, if you don't mind. Just come here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yes. I just want you to ask the question in the microphone. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, this is really in the nature of an observation. I was very much appreciative of Professor Kennan's comparative talk. I have to say that I was listening to the Chambers material. I was rather struck by another possible comparison, extraneous to this conference, but I thought rather telling. Lance Armstrong. And here we have another case of an extremely charming man righteously continuing to profess his innocence in the face of a very large body of contrary evidence. Now, that evidence comes mostly from his teammates, who are men of integrity, not as charming as Lance Armstrong himself. In the case of Alger Hiss, we have Whittaker Chambers. And those of you who have seen the pictures of these two men will have to be struck by the enormous difference in their appearance. Hiss, urbane, well-dressed. Chambers, he shambles. He is poorly dressed. His clothes don't really fit. He has bad teeth. So he is certainly not a charmer. And it seems to me, though this is a very small sample, that it behooves us to think that we need to be wary of charm. Because it may be that slovenly wins the day.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any comments? Mr. Evans.
I just want to say, everything you say is true. I'm someone who's long not been charming. I appreciate your observations. I might say it wasn't just Chambers. There were 5 witnesses who identified Hiss. Nathaniel Weil, Hedda Massing, I forgot a couple of others. Elizabeth Bentley knew about him. She didn't know him personally. So it wasn't just Chambers. And the Vasiliev documents and these other, not Vanoni, his name is not in there, though there's a reference that people think is Hiss. It is conclusive that Hiss was what Chambers said. And so I just wanted to make that clear. It wasn't just one, 2 men disagreeing.